Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast, a podcast for the average Joe covering football and everything New York Giants. Before I get started with today's episode, I want everyone to please follow me on Instagram. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. I'm also on Twitter, so please make sure you follow me on Twitter. That's _unsportsman. And lastly, but most importantly, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube page. So, as we all know, this week was the 2020 NFL Draft, and my beloved New York Giants had selected 4th overall. So this episode is going to cover pretty much my draft grade, thoughts, and analysis of the players that we picked. Let's get this episode started. With the 4th overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the New York Giants select offensive tackle Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. Andrew Thomas is a stud, folks. I know that many of the people had graded Andrew Thomas as the 4th best offensive tackle in the draft. I know many individuals wanted Tristan Wirfs as the offensive tackle. I personally wanted Jedrick Wills to get drafted at number 4. You know, Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, those were some of the guys we saw a lot, sort of come up in a lot of these mock drafts, over the last couple of weeks. And I've actually looked at a lot of mock drafts, and I didn't see Andrew Thomas get picked to the New York Giants. Every time I saw Andrew Thomas fall off the board in the mock drafts, he would sort of leave the board as early as to the Cleveland Browns, which is the number 10th pick. So I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was a little underwhelmed. I was a bit frustrated. I was sort of texting all of my buddies. If not, maybe my buddies beat me to texting them. They sort of reached out to me saying, could you believe this pick? This is the wrong pick, for multiple reasons, right? Other people wanted different offensive linemen. Other folks wanted Isiah Simmons. But I'm going to give you my thoughts here. After my nerves settled down, looked at the research, looked at the tape, this is the right pick. Dave Gettleman understood offensive tackle is a big issue. We signed Nate Solder to a mega deal, and he's continuously underperformed. Continuously is a liability. I mean, he is the reason. He's one of the main reasons why Daniel Jones was on his back. We all talk about, Daniel Jones needs to fix his fumbles. Well, it takes two to tango, right? The offensive line needs to protect Daniel Jones so Daniel Jones has more time to be composed, to hold the football and make the right decisions. And then, yes, there's the other half of the part where Daniel Jones just needs to be more careful with the football. But it starts with the offensive line. The only way you can be careful with the football is if you have time to throw and time to make the right decisions, time to be composed. So I can't, that's not all Daniel Jones' fault. It was the fault of our offensive line. But Andrew Thomas, he has experience. He was a 3-year starter at Georgia. Okay, guys, this was the right pick. This guy is great at the run game, and he's a great pass blocker. He is strong, and he is a mauler. Okay, I don't think Andrew Thomas is someone who's going to lose early in the down. He's strong enough to take on explosive pass rushers. He's great with his hands. So if a finesse pass rusher comes by and wants to try some of those spin moves or those swim or swinging moves and tries to get handsy with them, well, Andrew Thomas has the power and hands to combat that. You want to talk about a perfect tackle to come to this offensive line and to solidify it? This is the guy. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still holes on this offensive line, particularly with center and at right tackle now, because we'll end up moving Nate Solder to right tackle. But this is a good start. This is a good start, and I want everyone to be excited as much as I am. I think people were, it was very, there's a bit of indifference going on with this number 1 pick for the New York Giants. And the reason why is because a lot of folks wanted Isiah Simmons. There was so much hype around Isiah Simmons as being this sort of multifunctional Swiss Army knife defensive player. Someone who can be a linebacker, a sideline-to-sideline linebacker, someone who can play downhill, someone who can also play as safety, and someone who can also, at times be a functioning as a nickel cornerback. But I'm going to be honest with you. Had we drafted Isiah Simmons, that would have been the easy pick. That would have been the hyped up pick, but that would have been the wrong pick. Isiah Simmons would have had a very similar impact on the New York Giants defense the way the Odell Beckham pick had an impact on the New York Giants offense. You guys are probably thinking, well, what the hell does that mean? Well, what that means is Odell Beckham was such a great player, stuffed the stat sheet, I would even argue revitalized Eli Manning's career. Broke record numbers, was considered possibly a top 3 wide receiver after Antonio Brown and Julio Jones. Right, for about a good 2-3 year window when Beckham entered the league, that's what he was considered as. a top 3 wide receiver. But none of that translated to W's. We made it to one playoff, which was a wild card game. And we all know how Beckham performed in that wild card game. That stuff did not translate to W's, but Beckham was the most exciting and the only exciting thing to watch on Sundays. That's what Isiah Simmons was going to do. Isiah Simmons was going to show up on Sunday, make the explosive electrifying plays, maybe get an interception or 2 here or there, maybe get some sacks on blitz packages, play great in the box, get some hard tackles, but we weren't going to win because one of the biggest weaknesses, and it has been for probably since the last time we won a Super Bowl, and I probably said this since day 1 of my podcast, was our offensive line. It always has been. We tried the Eric Flowers experiment. We tried the Nate Soldier experiment, which, I can't blame Dave Gettleman for signing Nate Soldier the second Dave Gettleman became a GM for our team. But I do want to give him credit for the fact that since Dave Gettleman has been a GM for the New York Giants, that's something he continuously tried to improve. Signs Nate Soldier, drafts Will Hernandez, trades for Kevin Zeiler, dumps OBJ and Landon Collins. And we were able to get Kevin Zeiler a stud offensive guard, and we've seen that last season. We signed Mike Remmers to a 1-year deal, who I thought was more than serviceable at the right tackle position. But you know what? Unfortunately, we lost him. I believe Mike Remmers may have signed with the Cardinals. And you can check me on that. But but for that time that Mike Remmers played with us, I mean, that's some of the most better right tackle performance I've seen and outcome I've seen in recent history. Now we draft Andrew Thomas. He's going to immediately replace Nate Soldier at left tackle. But I want everyone to sort of hold their horses here, because everyone thinks Nate Soldier has gotten replaced by drafting Andrew Thomas. Nate Soldier is making a crap ton of money. There's no way he's just going to be riding the bench. They're going to move him to right tackle. He has familiarity with Joe Judge. Joe Judge probably knows, sort of Nate Soldier's tendencies, his weaknesses, his strength points. I think they're going to be able to, make it work with Nate Soldier, or they're going to at least try to give him a couple of games at starting right tackle. They're certainly going to try that. I mean, I know we had also signed Cameron Fleming in the offseason, but I don't know. I think the starting tackle spot on the right side is going to be between Nate Soldier and Cameron Fleming. But obviously more to come on that. But this pick is so important because we have 2 players that are so key to this franchise that we've now invested in with this one pick. Creating space for Saquon Barkley and keeping Daniel Jones upright. Because we've seen, while Saquon Barkley was injured, even before he was injured, there was just no space for Saquon to run. Where was Saquon supposed to run? How is he supposed to be effective if the front line can't create space? Andrew Thomas helps with that. And you combine someone like Andrew Thomas to a serviceable guard next to Will Hernandez. And I know John Halapio, Spencer Pulley, those aren't the greatest options at center, but they're serviceable centers. And you can't rebuild an offensive line overnight. This takes time. It takes progression. It takes player development. We have Kevin Zeiler at right guard. Look, guys, 3/5 of our offensive line looks pretty good right now. Our center, at the center position is a little shaky, and then at right tackle, there's some competition now because we have Cameron Fleming, and Nate Soldier is now subsequently going to be moved to right tackle. They've also drafted a couple of pairs with a couple of additional offensive linemen that I think are going to take some snaps at center and potentially in the future replace the right tackle position. And I'm going to get to those picks, eventually during this podcast. But I thought this was the right pick, and it was the smart pick. And now I want to get into pick number 2, round number 2, 36th overall. The New York Giants, Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge select Xavier Mckinney, safety out of Alabama. Folks, Xavier Mckinney is the top-rated safety in the 2020 draft class. He was a projected first-round talent, but for some strange reason, the NFL draft gods let the draft board move in a very odd direction, which I thought was the theme of the whole night, or rather the whole draft. But McKinney fell to us in the second round. Dave Gettleman snagged him up and drafted him, and I was so glad that we got him. And, if you folks were following my Twitter feed, throughout the first night, I was praying that McKinney would be available to us at 36th overall. And I'm glad we got him because that addresses our weakness in the secondary. Jabril Peppers, great safety, but he needs someone alongside of him. Antoine Bethea was frankly not cutting it. I mean, how many times did I rip Antoine Bethea on this podcast? And look, had Antoine Bethea been in his prime, we probably wouldn't even have to address the safety need, okay? But we had, how old was he? Like 34, 35, 36 years old? There's a reason why we gave up big plays. He was one of them. Xavier Mckinney is your prototypical safety Swiss Army knife player that can do anything on the football field. You want to talk about guys like Derwin James, Tyrann Mathieu, Earl Thomas, Eric Weddle, Eric Berry. Those guys, this is what we have. Those types of players is what we have in Xavier McKinney. People were upset about not drafting Isiah Simmons in the first round. Well, we essentially got, another version of Isiah Simmons and Xavier McKinney, but someone who's actually better in coverage. This isn't a safety that's like Landon Collins, who just can only play in the box and who's a great tackler and is a hard-nosed football player. This guy is that and more. You're getting someone who has a nose for the football like Landon Collins, who can play in the box at the safety position, but is also a center fielder. He's a true center fielder. He can defend the slot. He can sort of negate that mismatch that we've been getting killed by, which is the tight ends. We haven't been able to defend tight ends over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. This guy can do it. This guy can also sit back deep into the second level of the secondary and survey the field. He understands where the ball is going. He can understand where the quarterbacks are going, whether it's reading through their shoulders or reading their eyes. This guy can survey the field. He is a perfect plug-and-play safety for the New York Giants. And this is just another instance where Dave Gettleman is able to understand that the Giants need depth at the secondary, but they also need individuals you can plug and play right away, guys who can make immediate impacts. And this is it. Xavier McKinney is that guy. Now, our secondary is looking pretty good right now. Look, we have DeAndre Baker, James Bradbury, Julian Love as our nickel corner, who I know was also supposed to, was transitioning to being our safety, which he did last year. But now he doesn't need to do that. And then we have Xavier McKinney and Jabril Peppers. That is a pretty solid starting secondary, folks. You can get creative with the secondary like that. And before people knock, DeAndre Baker and call him a bust, well, he isn't completely a bust yet. The jury is still out on him. Look, in the first half of the season, I'm going to admit, DeAndre Baker, he laid an egg. But look at some of the tape, in that second half of the season, right? I mean, he was able to defend his receivers. What he excelled in was man-to-man coverage. And based on my studies of Patrick Graham and how he likes to run his defense, that's the type of defense he's going to run. He wants his DBs to cover man-to-man. He's either going to have a cover one defense, which is going to be a single high safety, and then he's going to bring a bunch of people close to the box, or he's going to have two safeties ranging out there and still have a couple other more people in the box. But at the end of the day, he always has his corners play man-to-man defense. So before you guys all knock DeAndre Baker, I think DeAndre Baker is going to have a bounce back year. And then we also have some additional, cornerbacks that, in our depth chart. We have Corey Ballantyne, Sam Beal, and Corey Ballantyne, Grant Haley. And I know, look, Sam Beal and Grant Haley, one of those are going to be a casualty in training camp. One of those will probably not be in the New York Giants jersey when the season starts, right? I mean, look, Sam Beal has had historical injuries since he's been into the league the last, 2-3 years. Wasn't able to see the field too much. Even when he did see the field, he wasn't that productive. And, Grant Haley, I mean, look, he's been with the New York Giants for a while, and I think he's the one that probably doesn't get cut just because, look, I know he's not the greatest player, but he has been reliable, and he has been there for the New York Giants. And I think just for that reason, they're going to just keep him around. But in addition to all of that, I mean, think about how the secondary is going to look when you have James Bradbury, DeAndre Baker, Julian Love, Jabril Peppers, and Xavier McKinney. You're going to have a bunch of good, young talent in that secondary. Look, man, this New York pass defense, it's getting revitalized. And I think Xavier McKinney, single-handedly improves our secondary that much because that is how high I am on this player. You can move him anywhere on the field. He can play any position in the secondary, and he can act as a linebacker as well. Then you're going to have that in addition to probably Lorenzo Carter lining up on as an outside linebacker. And you're probably going to have Blake Martinez. Then you're probably going to also have two additional defensive tackles at the actual line of scrimmage, which are those two hog mollies, right? We always talk about hog mollies, which is Dave Gettleman's favorite word to say when he talks about big football players. We're going to have Leonard Williams. We're going to have Dexter Lawrence, and we can mix and match our defensive line because we have B.J. Hill and Dalvin Tomlinson. This defense looks pretty okay. Now, it's all about seeing that and having that translate on the football field. And, I'm quite frankly done and tired of assuming that the defense is going to be, spectacular. I did that last year, and I was wrong. I thought that this defense was going to be a pretty good and competitive defense, but it wasn't at all. We were giving up, 28 points a game. Our offense couldn't even score or break the 20-point mark. And that's why we were getting killed every single game. And that's why we won only 4 games. But I don't know. I think we got one of the best safeties in the draft. That's got to tell you something. And this isn't one of those safeties that, can only do one thing, can only tackle, can only play in the box. This guy can cover. This guy can sort of counter that mismatch that's in the slot for slot receivers, can defend tight ends. Every team now in the NFL, almost every single team in the NFL has a serviceable tight end. There's obviously a handful of teams that have those premier tight end athletes, but almost every other single NFL team has a good tight end that they rely on to catch passes, to get them first downs, to convert red zone opportunities into touchdowns. Now we have a guy that can counter that, and that's Xavier Mckinney. In third down situations, look, we may not have a pass rusher yet, but in third down situations where we want to get to the quarterback, we can use either Jabril Peppers or Xavier Mckinney, who I would argue Xavier McKinney is way more better at actually getting to the quarterback in those blitz packages that I've seen. Because in Alabama, they use Xavier McKinney tons in the box. But he was also equally effective in zone coverage, which I would compare his impact to the New York Giants as Antrell Roll had to the New York Giants. Someone who is so great in coverage, but also equally effective in the box. That's what this guy's going to do. So kudos to Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge for selecting that pick, because there were rumors out there that had McKinney or a first-round level talent not been available at number 36, they probably would have had a trade in place to trade back. So I'm glad they didn't, especially considering the fact that they had traded their third-round pick for Leonard Williams, and they ended up going from picking 36 and had to wait till pick 99. So they had to wait a very long time to pick again after Xavier McKinney, which I believe is essentially the reason why a little bit in the middle round, you kind of see the Giants' picks and their momentum slow down. I don't think Gettleman did that well in rounds 3 and round 4. With the 99th overall pick in the third round, Dave Gettleman selects Matt Parrot, offensive tackle from UConn. I wasn't crazy about this pick. Everything I'm reading and hearing about this offensive tackle, Matt Parrot, is that he's a developmental project who potentially in the future could end up being a sure starter in the NFL. But nothing else leads to the fact that he can contribute to the New York Giants right now as we speak. If the season started tomorrow, there's no reports, no scouting out there, no statistics that let me know right now he can contribute to the New York Giants. And I just think for a developmental prospect, selecting someone like that in the third round is just way too aggressive. I honestly believe that from between rounds 1 and 4, you should be able to find players who can make an immediate impact. If you can't do that, if you can't find players who can, whether one, be a starter on the team day one, if you can't find plug-and-play starters, or you can't find players that you can, that will get snaps eventually during the season, it's not worth picking in rounds 1 through 4. Some of the weaknesses for this guy. So before I even get into this guy's weaknesses, right? This guy is 6'7", 318 pounds. You know what some of his weaknesses are? That he isn't strong enough. That he needs to work on building his strength. He couldn't move or push off people. He has nimble feet, so he's pretty effective in the running game, but he is not strong enough. You know what that lets me know? He's overweight and doesn't work out. How can you be 6'7", 318 pounds and not be strong? How is that something that the scouts, every single scouting report is saying you need to work on? I don't understand that. I don't understand how you can select someone like that in the third round. Everyone is saying he has a lot of upside. There's a lot of potential there. But you are speculating highly to take him in the third round, especially considering there were some pretty good defensive players that you could have taken in the third round. And that's what I was more upset about. I understand this offensive line needs a rebuild. We addressed the offensive line in round 1. We addressed the secondary in line 2. Why don't you address another part of the football field with the third pick? Someone who comes to mind, I'm actually looking at my notes, in the third round, the Giants could have selected Akeem Davis-Gaither. But instead, and mind you, Akeem Davis-Gaither is a linebacker who is a day one starter, a rangy linebacker who can play in the run game, be effective in the run game, sideline to sideline linebacker, who is also equally as good in coverage. We missed out on a transcending linebacker because we decided to take a gamble on a developmental offensive tackle. I understand that offensive tackle, the offensive line in general, is a weakness for our football team, but that does not mean you have to hit the panic button and not, at some point you have to take one of the better players available on the draft board. And also, let's be honest, look, we have a ton of linebackers on our team, but are any of those linebackers multi-dimensional linebackers? We got guys like Lorenzo Carter, who was very underwhelming in his sophomore year. He had a better rookie year than he did his sophomore year. Extremely underwhelming. We didn't re-sign Marcus Golden, who, let's be honest, Marcus Golden is a pure pass rusher anyways. Okay, he is a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not a sideline to sideline linebacker. We end up signing a Kyle Fackrell in the offseason, someone who a couple of years ago had a 10-sack season. And now he's out to prove that that's a fluke. But there's a reason why we signed him on a one-year deal, because we're not entirely sure. It was a one-year deal for $4 million, which is peanuts, okay, to an NFL football team, $4 million for 1 year. We signed him for that amount of money for 1 year because we don't necessarily believe that he's going to have that same production that he had as a 10-sack athlete a couple of years ago. But the reason why you give him $4 million is because, well, what's the risk? If we see him do it before, maybe he'll do it again. But you know what the issue with that is? You have a guy like that, Fackrell, who's able to come in and get you 10 sacks again. You have to now pay him that guy a year after, once the season's over. And how are you going to pay for him when you've clearly shown that you couldn't even pay for Marcus Golden, who's in a very similar position that Kyle Fackrell is in? And knowing that you have that weakness on the defensive side of the football, you draft an offensive tackle who won't be able to play in 2020 and needs to continue to work on his game. Look, I'm gonna read some of the things that the scouts said about Matt Peart. I'm going to talk about the negative things because I think these are glaring weaknesses for an offensive tackle to be selected in the third round. Okay? I'm going to read a couple of things. Play strength is not up to par. Unable to bench press defenders off his frame. Flexible but needs more discipline in keeping pad level lower. Guys, these are core fundamental things an offensive tackle needs to be good at to start in the NFL. Disjointed movement and working from first to second block. You know what that means? That means he can't get to the second level. I don't understand. Some of his strong points is that he has nimble feet, so he should be able to, do well in running plays where, running plays that go out as stretch plays. But if he can't get to the second level, who cares how nimble his feet are? Feet occasionally stall when mirroring at the top of the rush. You know how bad that is? That means he probably trips over himself. That means he has no balance. Poor hand placement and redirect power doom him when his edge is challenging. Guys, you cannot be a starting offensive tackle with these types of weaknesses. Poor hand placement and redirect power doom him when his edge is challenged. You know what that sounds like? Matt Parrot is sounding like Eric Flowers. And we drafted this guy in the third round purely on the fact that he is 6'7", 318 pounds. And started several years at UConn. That's why I disagree with this pick. because we chose that instead of a sure day one starter linebacker and Akeem Davis-Gaither. That is what upsets me greatly about this pick. This is something that I wasn't thrilled about. I was completely not thrilled about the third round pick for the New York Giants. And then I want to go into round 4. Because in round 4, Dave Gettleman understands that secondary is a weakness of ours. And so, as we saw in the second round, we drafted Xavier Mckinney. In the 4th round, Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge and company select Darnay Holmes, cornerback out of UCLA. Again, considering the fact that we have now selected 2 offensive linemen, a safety in the first 3 rounds, why wouldn't the 4th round be a situation where you would prioritize an all-around linebacker, a linebacker that can get to the quarterback and be equally effective in coverage? It's just something I didn't really understand here. And a lot of people are, trust me, I read all these comments that are on these Facebook posts and on Twitter. I read all these comments before I get on here and I do an episode. People keep trying to explain what Patrick Graham's defense is, saying Patrick Graham likes to, blitz with linebackers and cornerbacks. Could you explain to me how else you're supposed to blitz? What other packages require a blitz? You need linebackers and you need extra DBs. How else are you going to blitz? Your defensive line is already required to go downhill. What the hell are you guys talking about? Of course, Patrick Graham's blitz packages require him to send an extra linebacker and extra DBs. That's the whole point of it, you morons. I don't understand. How is that? Please don't talk to me about football and explain to me that Patrick Graham's defensive schemes and blitz packages are so particular that he needs a cornerback to send in a blitz, because that's what people do. James Bettcher did that all the time. Our pass rush was so ineffective. Look, when your pass rush is so ineffective, that's when you send in an extra DB, because your front 7 can't get the job done. And no one's looking for that cornerback to get in the backfield. How is that an explanation as to why we would select a cornerback when you can just bulk up the front 7? You use that time to bulk up the front 7. And then round 4, you know who we missed out on? We had missed out on Troy Dye. And everyone who knows him has followed me on Twitter during the draft, followed me on Instagram during the draft. I wanted Troy Dye, who's a linebacker for Oregon. Has a great knack for getting sacks, and he's also speedy and quick enough to play in coverage. And actually decent in coverage too. But instead, we get a cornerback, Darnay Holmes. And to be honest, just looking at the draft board, there were other DBs we probably could have selected that would have been great at the nickel position. A lot of people, and the thing about Darnay Holmes, I'm reading a lot of conflicting reports. So someone needs to tell me what it is. Because on the other hand, I'm reading he had experience at the nickel corner and he can play a nickel corner, as in defending slot receivers. On the other hand, I'm reading that he can't defend slot wide receivers. Then in the NFL, he may potentially get burned. So someone needs to make up their mind, because if I'm reading conflicting reports about his ability to defend the slot position, then that's a big question mark. And people are just assuming that Darnay Holmes is going to come in and take over that position. We just drafted Xavier Mckinney. That means Julian Love is going right back to the nickel corner spot. And I want to read some of these weaknesses that I've looked up on based on his scouting report, to let you know why I'm sort of very skeptic about Darnay Holmes' ability to be a nickel corner. Lack of functional length. So look, usually when you're not a tall cornerback, you're not going to play the outside, you're going to play the inside. So fine, whatever. But below average instincts off coverage. Below average instincts from off coverage. Does that sound like someone who can play a slot corner? There are usually so many breaks in those routes from a slot receiver and a tight end. You think someone who has below average instincts from off coverage can defend routes that have so many breaks? Tight hips lead to clunky transitions in space. Missing twitch and burst for a shorter corner. Slow to gather and drive at the top of his drops. Oh, and I love this. This one is something that really let me know Darnay Holmes can take over that slot corner position. Route anticipation and response quickness miss the mark. Clever route runners can spin him around. Guys, that is what the NFL is full of. That's why you're a slot receiver, because slot receivers are clever route runners. Can someone please tell me how that allows him to take over immediately and be a day one starter at the nickel corner position? I would rather much have Julian Love and Corey Ballantyne ahead of Darnay Holmes in the depth chart. But he is good. Like, he does have some strength, and he played decently at UCLA. But when you hear some of these weaknesses, that doesn't sound like a slot corner. I'm not saying he's a bad player. But when you select someone like that, thinking that that's going to address and add depth to the secondary, it's not. Especially when you miss out on someone who can get to the quarterback like Troy Dye. And Troy Dye was also someone who's known as being speedy enough and fast enough to play in coverage as a linebacker. Because Troy Dye isn't this oversized linebacker. He was your prototypical linebacker that can move anywhere around the football field. And I'm going to be honest. Look, Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman, you wanted a cornerback? You wanted someone that can play that nickel spot? There were other options. Okay, there were certainly other options. How about Troy Pride Jr., who subsequently, a couple of picks after, went to the Carolina Panthers? That guy is probably going to start for the Panthers. That guy is more adept to actually being a starter in a slot nickel corner than Darnay Holmes is. You know who I really was high on, who I really, really liked also? Terrell Burgess, the safety out of Utah. So he's actually a safety, but he's played a ton of snaps at the nickel corner position and succeeded at the nickel corner position. You wanted a defensive back that can do that? There are two other players on the draft board that I believe were graded higher than Darnay Holmes. But taking all that into consideration, right? We drafted 2 offensive linemen and 2 people in the secondary within the first 4 rounds. That means there are other areas we did not address. We didn't address the front 7. The front 7 includes the defensive line and linebackers. Good linebackers, right? People who can do everything, multiple things at once, aren't situational linebackers. We need linebackers who are all-down linebackers. I don't know, is Blake Martinez really going to be an all-down linebacker if he's not that great at coverage? We've been missing a premier linebacker to lead the front 7 since Antonio Pierce, and I'm sick and tired of that being neglected every single draft. We thought that was B.J. Goodson, but it clearly wasn't. And then in the 5th round and the 6th round is right, then Gettleman company finally decided to make some pretty good picks. Picks that I was okay with, I was encouraged about our future. People who I think are probably going to get some snaps in the 2020 NFL season. So in the 5th round, Dave Gettleman drafts offensive guard from Oregon, Shane Lemieux. Shane Lemieux is not only an offensive guard, but it has the willingness to take snaps at center, has some experience taking snaps at center, and I think that this guy is very well going to take some snaps in 2020. Look, he's going to be sitting behind John Halapio, Spencer Pulley, but this guy has grit. This guy's tough. This guy can get to the second level. This guy can take on linebackers from the tape I've seen, from the scouting reports I've read. This guy is a future starter in the NFL. He has a couple of, sometimes his techniques when it comes to him using his hands and taking on blockers isn't always the greatest. Sometimes he isn't the most athletic guard, but he's good enough. This guy looks like he'll punch you in the face, and that's what you need from your offensive linemen, guys. You don't need pretty boys in the offensive line. You need guys that are willing to get nasty and willing to get into your face, and this guy's going to do a lot of dirty work. This guy was, I believe, a 3-year, 4-year starter? Yeah, he was a senior, so I think he was a 4-year or 3-year starter at Oregon. This kid has experience. Okay, I don't know. I think this guy is going to be a sleeper pick for us this year. He is a leader, and he's powerful. And then look, I want to read a couple of good, strong points from him based on reading a couple of the scouting reports. Climbs up and smacks take-on linebackers with good jolt. Works hard to mirror and slide with the rushers. Will reset, and look, this is one of my favorite points about Shane Lemieux. Will reset hands and regain positioning against rush counters. I mean, that is what you're looking for a guard. And even from your center. I think we potentially have our future starting center. I have more confidence in this pick than I had confidence in the Matt Parrot pick. the third-round pick out of UConn, the offensive tackle. I have way more confidence in Shane Lemieux than I have in Matt Peart. This is a great pick, and this guy looks like he has all the sort of prototypical characteristics that you're looking for in a guard and a potential center. Someone who's willing to take on linebackers. That's what a center needs to do, in running plays especially. They need to get to that second level and take on linebackers. Smack these guys in the mouth, and that's what this guy's going to do. Again, look. For his size, he doesn't have the greatest arms, so he's not able to get too handsy and be able to use great technique at times. But I think that's something that he can maybe work on as he sort of progresses into the NFL. They also mentioned that he lacks lateral movement. So, look, because of that, they said that he wasn't able to reach, sort of that second level blocks on a consistent basis. But think about that. They're saying he isn't able to get to the second level blocks on a consistent basis. I take that as a half glass full for a fifth-round pick. That means there are signs and the capabilities of this guy being a great guard or center who is able to get to the second line and take on linebackers. This player to me is a half glass full player, and I think he's going to be a potential starter for the New York Giants. I do see him making the roster. And you know what? Look, John Halapio, Spencer Pulley, those guys, they get hit with injuries. Offensive linemen get hit with injuries. Whether Shane Lemieux takes snaps as a center or an offensive guard, I think he's going to find his way in the NFL this year. He will see green this year. He's going to see the football field this year because I think he's just that talented. And I think, right now there's a lot of, we're sort of building up the depth in our offensive line, but everyone isn't a sure starter. Someone might get injured. Someone might get a concussion in the game and have to sit out during that game. I think he's going to see the football field this year, and so I'm very optimistic about this pick. And then in round 6, and this is sort of one of my additional favorite picks in the NFL draft, in addition to Xavier McKinney. So this is probably my second favorite draft pick. Again, look, Andrew Thomas was a great pick, a smart pick, a practical pick, but I'm a very defensive-minded person. So that's why this next pick, the 6th-round pick, is my favorite pick of the NFL draft, who I think is going to be a big contributor to the New York Giants this season, and that's Cam Brown, linebacker out of Penn State. Folks, this man is a great tackler, hard-nosed for the football, and can wrap up really well as also. So not only is he someone that can sort of go head-on or tackle with the shoulders, but he has long enough arms where he can wrap up, quarterbacks that are trying to scramble out of the pocket or running backs that are trying to move up the sideline. He is a downhill player, but not so much of a sideline-to-sideline player. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because I didn't see enough of that on the tape and the highlights. A lot of his highlights, a lot of the plays that he made were because he was moving downhill. What I mean by that is, I haven't seen much where he's able to chase a running back down to the sideline. I haven't seen much where sort of he has to defend a wide receiver who's doing a slant route or a drag route and is able to keep up with them, man-to-man or one-on-one. Granted, I'm not saying he isn't capable of that. This is just something I haven't seen. That isn't something that I've seen in his highlights. What I have seen in his highlights, great tackler, hard tackler, can cause fumbles, knows how to get to the quarterback. He's very, very smart on how to get to the quarterback. This isn't someone that has the greatest moves per se, but he knows how to move within the offensive line to get through the holes and get to the quarterback very quickly. He has a burst, and he's an attacker. He's very, very aggressive, long arms and tall, but the only sort of knock on him that I have, which I think other folks have on him, is that he seems a little slender. Now, some folks are saying, he should, work on putting on some more muscle, as he, progresses into the NFL and develops into, a full player. But, I would be careful with that because, you don't want to get too much muscle where that ends up slowing you down. And that's the only sort of like red flag I would wave, is that I don't want too many people telling him that, hey, you need to, put on a lot of muscle, and then he sort of loses his speed, because his speed is the reason why he was so effective. He was so fast that, in fact, Penn State used him in coverage a lot. He was used as a zone cover linebacker. Now, when I saw some of those plays where he was zone cover linebacker, at times he seemed a little bit lost in space. So I don't know if he can effectively defend a slot wide receiver. I would never put him in that situation because I think an NFL slot wide receiver is going to spin him inside and out. But I would certainly match him up against the tight end because I think he can go foot for foot, step by step against the tight end. I think so. I think he's as athletic and if not as fast as probably some of the more better tight ends in the NFL. Again, I'm not saying he's that good at coverage, but he's that good. He's athletic enough and fast enough where he can, keep up with these tight ends and also make a play on the ball and get some pass defenses. I think Patrick Graham's going to use him a lot this year. Similar to how we used Oshane Jimenez last year, right? Oshane Jimenez isn't an all-down linebacker. He predominantly played on third down situations and any other part of the down sets where it was clearly a passing situation, where Oshane Jimenez pinned his ears back and all he had to do was get to the quarterback. I think Patrick Graham's going to use him in instances like that, right? Because currently we don't have a pass rusher. We don't really have an edge rusher. But I also think he's going to use him in blitz packages as well. And what I mean by that is, look, we'll have our outside linebackers, we'll have our defensive linemen, and then he might be that extra defender that comes in on blitz schemes. Because I think he's that good. I think he's going to be that effective. And, don't be surprised if, Cam Brown gets us about 5 sacks in 2020. I think he's that good of a player. And I think, but again, he's not a 3-down linebacker. And that's what we're still sort of missing. And that's where we missed on in this draft. Because there were a couple of good 3-down linebackers that we missed in round 3 and round 4. Because we ended up going with a developmental offensive tackle and a cornerback who I thought wasn't essentially the best available DB on the board. Where there were other DBs, like I mentioned, Troy Pride Jr. and Terrell Burgess, who are equally good in coverage, probably not better than Darnay Holmes. And folks, as you know, we ended up stocking up on linebackers after selecting Cam Brown. We selected and drafted Carter Coughlin, in addition to a couple of other linebackers at the tail end in the 7th round. And look, I'm not going to get too sort of analytical with our 7th round picks, because at the end of the day, look, those guys are going to be special team casualties. Those guys are most likely not going to see any playing time in 2020 other than being on the special teams. Unless we get hit with a crazy injury bug, I don't expect to see Carter Coughlin hit the football field unless it's like a blowout. There's a lot of people mentioned we have a lot of linebackers, so we didn't need to prioritize linebackers. Although my argument to that is, well, we don't have enough good multi-dimensional linebackers. But look, do I think Carter Coughlin's going to... the thing with Carter Coughlin, there's a lot of hype around him, but from the tape and highlights I've seen, he's very undersized, and he doesn't have that many good moves. I mean, the reason why he's able to get to the backfield into the quarterback is because he has he's pretty fast. He doesn't have a great first step, but he gets pretty explosive in his pursuit to the quarterback, and that's why he's able to peel off around offensive tackles. I don't think that's going to work on more experienced NFL starting offensive tackles. So I don't know how much success he's going to have there. Something also to keep in mind about Carter Coughlin, in 2018 he had, I believe it was 8 or 9.5 sacks. In 2019, that dropped by half and it went to 4.5 sacks. And it wasn't like Carter Coughlin was injured. It was because they understood they had to, they knew how to sort of scheme against Carter Coughlin. Because Carter Coughlin is not a pure pass rusher. But the thing is, he's fast enough where I think, he's going to be a good special teams player. And who knows, as he's able to develop his game, maybe he ends up getting some snaps for the New York Giants. But in the foreseeable future, I don't see it. So, folks, that's my take on the New York Giants, and I give it a grade B. I don't give it a B+, and I don't give it an A. Some folks are giving it a B+ to A or A-. I think that's a little too aggressive because there's not enough day one starters that came out of this draft, or so it seems. But I'm going to give it a B because we addressed weaknesses in the offensive line. We got 2 for sure starters, and we got a couple of players that are probably going to see the football field this year in Cam Brown and Darnay Holmes. Although, while I'm not crazy about the Darnay Holmes pick, I certainly think they're going to mix him up in there. He's going to get some playing time. I think Cam Brown's obviously going to get some playing time and be as effective as Oshane Jimenez was, and even Lorenzo Carter during Lorenzo Carter's rookie year. And then we have 2 starters: Andrew Thomas, who's going to plug and play day one, and Xavier McKinney, who makes our secondary just that much better. Our secondary has elevated because we drafted Xavier McKinney. And even similar to the offensive line, our offensive line has gotten much better because we're able to plug and play Andrew Thomas. And folks, that about wraps it up. That was the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast. Please, everyone, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. I'm also on Twitter, so follow me on Twitter. That's _unsportsman. Like this video, subscribe, and drop your comments on what you think of my analysis of our 2020 NFL draft class. Peace out. It's your boy HP.